So on our last part one, last recording, we mentioned that every day there's two high tides, and there's also, and we want to talk about this a little bit, there are also two low tides every day because the Earth is constantly turning. We call that the Earth's rotation. So because the Earth rotates, because of the Earth rotation. So the Earth is turning, and so you have the high tides on opposite sides of the Earth, but between the two high tides there's also low tides, where the water has been pulled away to the high tide. So we have these lower areas of sea level. So here's the Earth as an example. Let's say that we've got the moon over here and the sun is way over here. And of course, if I'm looking at the depth of the ocean, there's a bulge over here because the sun's pulling the ocean water, and then there's a bulge on this side where the moon is pulling it. So we're getting pulled here and pulled here. So we've got these two bulges, okay? All right, that would be the high tides, which are affected. And of course, at any given time, there's a high tide on each side of the Earth, right? But to have that thickening of the water, that piling up of the waters on both sides of the Earth, you have to have a thinning. And so there's a low tide over here, while there's a high tide on both sides, but there's also a low tide over here. So you have two low tides and two high tides. So we have an H over here, a high tide, and a high tide there. And then we have a low tide right in between those two high tides. So just bear in mind that during the course of a day, every place in the ocean that will witness a lowering of the ocean twice a day, and an increase in the ocean height, sea level, twice a day. Okay, now during the spring tides, and of course I'm going to be giving you this has a good worksheet on this, but during those spring tides, there are the low tides, which happen on each side of the Earth, just like this diagram. I'm going to put two X's here. There's the low tide, there's the low tide. So those low tides are lower, and the high tides are higher than during neap tides. Okay. Now, there is a place on the Earth that has exceptionally high tides. Most of the tides go up, a couple feet around the Earth, but there's a place in the Bay of Fundy, which is in Canada. And let me put down the Bay of Fundy. You may have a chance to visit this. I have not. I would love to visit the Bay of Fundy. It's in Canada, on the coast, over kind of near Newfoundland. So this has the highest range, has the largest, highest high tide and the lowest low tide, meaning it's got the largest tidal range in the world. And it's because there's a real long bay right here, the Bay of Fundy. So it's like the coastline comes along here, and then there's this real long, narrow bay that goes way up this way, and like this. And so out here is the Atlantic Ocean, And when the high tide, when the tides are going up, they tend to go up way up this bay, okay? And because of the shape of the bay, this has to do with the shape of the bay. It's actually, the water is not any higher, but the way it goes up this bay, because of its shape, the tidal range is it's more than 50 feet. So it's amazing. You get pictures of this bay, and you can probably Google the Bay of Fundy and take a look at that, but they'll show the level of the sea goes up over 50 feet every time the high tide comes in, and then the high tide goes out and makes a low tide. Now, usually on open coast, not where there's a bay, right, but just open coastline, the tidal range is just a few feet. It's usually about 6 to 10 feet. So here's a place where it's up to 10 times bigger in its tidal range. Isn't that amazing? So we have a really interesting thing here. So I'm going to be sending you this tidal worksheet, and you want to fill it out, and then I'm going to send you with it the key, which has the answers. But I want you to try to fill it out first on your own, write in the answers, and then you use the key and see how close you come. I've put some answers in there, and you'll be able to do that really well. Thank you, and God bless you.